I had been working at Westfield Elementary in the Silver Lake neighborhood of Los Angeles for 11 years when I met Diane Holloway, and I want to be clear about something before I even begin. In 11 years of teaching first grade, I had never once filed a formal complaint against a parent. Not once. I had handled helicopter moms who emailed me at midnight about spelling test scores. I had navigated dads who showed up unannounced during reading groups because they were convinced their child was being overlooked. I had sat across from parents who argued with me about whether their 6-year-old truly deserved a needs improvement on the handwriting section of a progress report. I had handled all of it with patience, professionalism, and what my principal, Dr. Anita Reyes, called an almost supernatural ability to de-escalate. But Diane Holloway was something different. Diane Holloway was a category all her own, and by the time she was done, she had made one mistake so large, so thoroughly documented, and so impossible to walk back that it changed the entire culture of our school and ended her campaign to remove me from my classroom permanently. She enrolled her son, Carter, in late September, about 3 weeks into the school year. Most late enrollments came with a folder: prior school records, IEP documentation if applicable, vaccination history, and Carter's folder arrived the day before he did, transferred from a private school in Brentwood that, according to the transfer notes, the family had left voluntarily. I didn't read anything into that at the time. Families moved. Circumstances changed. I set up Carter's cubby, wrote his name on a laminated card in my signature bubble letters, and made sure his reading level assessment was ready for his first week. I wanted him to feel welcome. That was always my priority with late arrivals. Carter himself was a sweet kid. Quiet, a little watchful, the way some children are when they're new and haven't yet decided whether a place is safe. He had wide brown eyes and a habit of chewing on the collar of his shirt when he was thinking hard. In his first 2 days, he mostly observed. By the end of his first week, he had made a tentative friendship with a boy named Mateo, and the two of them could be found at the block corner during free choice time, building what Carter solemnly informed me was a parking structure for emergency vehicles. I told him that was very important infrastructure. He nodded like I had confirmed something he already knew. Diane Holloway, I met on Carter's 3rd day. She came to pick up not in the carpool line but on foot, walking directly up to the classroom door, while I was still releasing students in the organized dismissal sequence we used to keep things orderly. I had a system. Each child was released when I could see their authorized adult. We made eye contact, I nodded, and the child walked to them. It kept 32 6-year-olds from surging out the door simultaneously. Every parent learned the system by the 2nd week. Diane walked past the waiting line of parents, came directly to the door, and called Carter's name over my shoulder while I was crouched down helping another student with a backpack zipper. I stood up, turned around, smiled, and explained the dismissal procedure as warmly as I could. I told her I just needed to finish releasing the students whose adults were already checked in, and I'd get Carter right out to her. She looked at me the way some people look at a parking meter, like an obstacle that existed purely to inconvenience her, and said, "He's my son. I don't need to wait in a line to get my own child." I kept my smile in place and told her that the procedure existed for every child's safety, that it would only take 2 or 3 minutes, and that I appreciated her patience. She made a sound that wasn't quite a word and stepped back. Carter was released 2 minutes later. She took his hand and walked away without looking at me again. I noted the interaction in my daily log that evening. It was something my mentor teacher had taught me in my first year: keep a log, date everything, write down unusual interactions, not because you expect them to matter, but because memory is fallible and documentation isn't. 11 years of teaching had made that habit as automatic as taking attendance. I wrote, "Parent of Carter H. Dismissal, declined to follow procedure, brief conversation, resolved without incident." Then I closed the notebook and didn't think much more about it. The next 3 weeks brought a series of what I can only call escalating tests. Diane sent Carter to school on picture day with a note, not a question, a note, informing me that Carter was to be photographed first because she had an appointment and could not wait for the standard alphabetical order. I replied that picture day scheduling was managed by the office, not individual teachers, and gave her the main number. She replied to my email, carbon copying our assistant principal, a man named Mr. Garfield, and described my response as unhelpful and dismissive. I forwarded the exchange to Mr. Garfield myself, noted that I had directed her to the appropriate resource, and left it there. The week after that, Diane arrived at curriculum night, our annual evening where parents came to hear about the year's learning goals, and during the QVEA portion, asked why the classroom library didn't have more advanced options for children who were reading above grade level. It was a fair question, framed in a way that made it clear she felt Carter was being underserved. I told her about our leveled reading system, explained that I differentiated instruction for every student, including those reading above benchmark, and offered to schedule a conference to discuss Carter's individual progress in more detail. She said, in front of the other 30-odd parents in the room, that she hoped that conference would also include a discussion of whether this classroom environment is actually the right fit for a child of Carter's abilities. The room went very quiet. I held her gaze and said I looked forward to the conversation. After she left, 2 other parents came up to me separately and apologized for her behavior. I thanked them and told them there was nothing to apologize for. The conference happened the following Tuesday. Dr. Reyes sat in, which was standard practice, when tensions had already been flagged. I brought Carter's assessment portfolio, his reading benchmark scores, his writing samples, his math fluency data, observation notes, everything. The data showed what I had observed. Carter was a bright, capable child reading at a solid mid-second grade level, which in first grade was genuinely impressive, and I was already giving him extension activities to keep him challenged. He was also, the notes reflected, still adjusting socially and emotionally to the transition, and that was completely normal. I went through everything methodically, warmly, with specific examples. Diane listened, and then she said the thing I had been bracing for since curriculum night. She said she didn't think Carter's potential was being honored in my classroom, and she would be requesting a transfer to the other first grade class. I told her that was absolutely her right as a parent, and that any such request would go through Dr. Reyes and the office. Dr. Reyes confirmed the process calmly. Diane looked at me and said, "I'm sure you're a perfectly adequate teacher for most children, but Carter isn't most children." Then she picked up her bag and left. Dr. Reyes and I sat in the empty classroom for a moment after she was gone. Anita had been in education for 26 years and had the particular quality of stillness that comes from having seen nearly everything. She looked at my documentation binder on the table between us and said, "Keep adding to that." I told her I intended to. The transfer request was submitted and denied within the week. The other first grade class, taught by my colleague and close friend Rosa Mendenhall, was already at the district maximum of 33 students. There was simply no space. Diane did not take this well. She sent an email to Dr. Reyes that I was later shown, in which she described the denial as evidence that the school was prioritizing administrative convenience over student welfare. She also, for the first time, made a vague suggestion that my classroom management style might be the source of Carter's lingering social difficulties, as if the mild adjustment period every late-enrolling child experienced was somehow a product of my inadequacy rather than a natural part of transition. I added all of it to the log. November arrived, and with it, our school's annual International Food Festival, one of my favorite events of the year. Each class was assigned a country, and families were invited to contribute dishes, decorations, and artifacts. My class had been assigned Japan, and the children were beyond excited. We had spent 2 weeks learning about Japanese culture, geography, and art, and the kids had made paper cranes that now hung from the classroom ceiling in long, swaying garlands. The festival was held on a Friday afternoon in the multipurpose room, and parents were invited to walk through, sample food, and talk to the students about what they'd learned. Diane arrived 40 minutes early. I know this because Mrs. Okonkwo, the parent volunteer coordinating setup, texted me while I was still walking my class from the playground. The text said, "Carter's mom is here demanding to know why there's no labeling system for food allergens." I replied that we had followed the district protocol for food events, which included a sign-in sheet for families declaring allergies and a corresponding color-coded sticker system on the dishes. I had personally overseen the setup of that system the morning of the event. When I arrived with my class, Diane was standing at the entrance to the multipurpose room holding a printed copy of something. I couldn't see what yet, and when she saw me, she walked toward me with the specific energy of someone who had been preparing for this moment. She told me, loudly enough for several other arriving parents to hear, that the allergy labeling system was completely inadequate and that she had pulled up the California Department of Education's guidelines on school food safety, and my system did not comply. She held out the printed pages. I asked her, very calmly, if Carter had a documented food allergy. She said that wasn't the point. I said, gently, that it was quite relevant to understanding her concern. She said she was speaking on behalf of all the children in the school, not just Carter. I took a breath, thanked her for her concern, told her I would be happy to review the guidelines she'd brought after the event concluded, and asked her to please step to the side, so I could get 32 excited first graders settled without someone blocking the entrance. That was apparently the wrong phrasing. She did not step to the side. She raised her voice and told me I was being dismissive, that this was a safety issue, and that she was going to report this event to the district office. I looked at Mrs. Okonkwo, who had the expression of someone watching a car slowly roll toward a fire hydrant. I looked at my 22 6-year-olds standing in a patient, confused line behind me, some of them holding the paper cranes they'd brought to display. I looked at Diane. I said, clearly and without any edge, I hear that you're concerned. The event coordinator has my number. I need to attend to my students right now, and I'd appreciate it if you would allow us to enter. And then I walked my class inside. She did report it to the district. The district reviewed the setup documentation Mrs. Okonkwo and I submitted, compared it to the guidelines Diane had cited, and sent back a response confirming that our allergy protocol had been fully compliant. I received a copy of that response. I printed it and added it to the binder. Things were quiet for about 2 weeks after the festival, in the way that a smoke alarm is quiet right before the battery dies and starts chirping every 45 seconds. Diane's emails continued, to Dr. Reyes, to Mr. Garfield, to the district parent liaison, each one a variation on the theme that I was unsuitable, that Carter was suffering, that something needed to be done. None of the emails contained anything specific enough to act on, because Carter was, by every measurable indicator, doing well. His reading had moved up another half level. He had solidified his friendship with Mateo and had begun including 2 other boys in their construction projects. He had stopped chewing his collar. When I asked him during our weekly one-on-one reading check-in what his favorite part of school was, he said, without hesitation, building stuff and snack. That seemed healthy to me. The mistake, the actual, consequential, irreversible mistake, happened on a Tuesday in December, 12 days before winter break. I had a student in my class named Priya Anand. Priya was a quiet, meticulous girl who was working through some significant reading difficulties that we suspected were related to an undiagnosed processing difference. Her parents, Sanjay and Meera Anand, were engaged, warm, and had been working closely with our school's resource specialist to get Priya properly assessed. The process was underway, but not complete. These things took time, as anyone familiar with the special education evaluation timeline in California would know. In the meantime, Priya was receiving additional support in class, and I had been documenting her progress carefully as part of the formal assessment record. What Priya's situation required, above all else, was privacy. Her parents had not shared her assessment status with other families. That was their right. A child's educational records, their learning differences, their evaluation status, these things were protected under federal law. The Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act existed precisely because a child's academic and developmental information was not community property. Every teacher, administrator, and school employee who worked with children understood this, or was required to. Diane Holloway, apparently, had been talking to other parents. She had noticed, as observant parents sometimes did, that Priya occasionally left the classroom with a resource specialist. She had decided what this meant. And on that Tuesday in December, she brought what she had decided to a pickup conversation with 3 other parents in the carpool line, during which she stated, with apparent confidence, that Priya Anand clearly had some kind of learning disability and that the school was trying to hide it and that it was unfair to the other students. One of the parents in that conversation was Meera Anand, Priya's mother. I did not witness this directly. What I know comes from Meera, who came to my classroom the following morning, 20 minutes before school started, and sat down in one of the tiny first-grade chairs across from my desk and told me what had happened. Her voice was very controlled, the way voices become when someone is keeping themselves together by an act of will. She told me what Diane had said, who had been present, and what Priya had overheard, because Priya had been standing right there, holding her mother's hand, listening to another parent explain to a group of strangers that she was different and that this was a problem for other children. I listened to all of it. I handed Mira the box of tissues I kept in my desk drawer. I told her I was deeply sorry that this had happened, that what had been said was wrong on every level, and that I was going to bring it to Dr. Reyes immediately. I asked if she would be willing to provide a written account of what she had witnessed, including who was present. She said yes. I went to Dr. Reyes before first bell. I had the binder with me. 11 weeks of entries. Every email, every incident, every note from every conversation. Dr. Reyes read Mira's account while I sat across from her. Then she read it again. Then she picked up her phone and called our district's compliance office. What happened next was not a simple parent complaint. What Diane had done in that carpool line crossed a specific and serious line. Disclosing or speculating about a student's disability status or evaluation process to other parents was a gossip. It was a potential violation of the student's privacy rights, and the school was obligated to take it seriously. The compliance office opened a formal review. The district's parent liaison was notified. The other parents who had been present were contacted and asked to provide their accounts. Every single one of them confirmed what Mira had said. One of the parents, a father who had been on the periphery of the conversation, sent a written statement describing Diane's comments as detailed and definitive, not casual. Another parent noted that when Mira Anand had arrived and realized what was being discussed, Diane had not apologized. She had doubled down, saying that she was just being honest and that parents had a right to know these things. Dr. Reyes called Diane in for a meeting. I was not present for that meeting, but I was told about it afterward by Dr. Reyes, who had every right to tell me since my documentation had formed part of the basis for the conversation. Diane came in prepared to talk about me. She had written a multi-page document outlining her concerns about my teaching, my attitude, and my handling of Carter's educational experience. She put it on the table before Dr. Reyes had said a single word. Dr. Reyes set it aside. She told Diane that they were not meeting to discuss classroom concerns today. She presented Diane with a formal written notice that a complaint had been filed regarding her conduct in the carpool line, that the district was reviewing it under its family privacy and conduct policies, and that Diane was being formally advised that discussing, speculating about, or disseminating any information regarding another student's educational status or learning needs to any third party was prohibited. If it happened again, the district would pursue further action, which could include restrictions on campus access. Diane, according to Dr. Reyes, was not expecting that. She had walked in holding her document, prepared to be the one delivering a consequence. Instead, she was the one receiving a formal written notice with the district's letterhead on it. She tried to redirect the conversation to her concerns about me. Dr. Reyes told her those concerns were noted and that any legitimate pedagogical concerns could be submitted in writing to the office, where they would be reviewed in the normal course. She did not say that 11 weeks of documentation existed, showing a pattern of escalating complaints with no substantive foundation. She didn't need to. Diane's document went into a file, and the formal notice went into a different, more significant file. The document Diane had submitted about me was reviewed by Mr. Garfield and Dr. Reyes together. They then met with me and walked me through it. Most of it was opinion. Carter wasn't being challenged enough. I hadn't been warm enough at pickup. The dismissal procedure was excessive. There was nothing that rose to the level of a substantiated concern. In fact, Dr. Reyes observed, the timing and pattern of the complaints, set against the backdrop of the privacy incident, suggested that the campaign against me had been motivated less by genuine concern for Carter and more by frustration that her attempts to control her son's placement and environment had not succeeded. They didn't close the file on Diane. They kept it open. January brought a new semester and a quieter carpool line. Diane still brought Carter to school. Carter still came to my classroom. He was, by January, reading at a solid second-grade level and had begun writing stories during free write time, elaborate, rambling narratives about emergency vehicles saving cities from floods. I displayed them on the writing wall the same way I displayed every child's work. One afternoon during dismissal, Carter pointed at his story on the wall before he left and said, "Did you read it?" I told him I had, that it was one of my favorites on the wall. He looked at it for another moment with that serious expression of his, then said, "I might add a helicopter." I told Diane was there for that exchange. She was standing at the door in the proper place, following the dismissal procedure that she had fought me on back in September, and she watched her son talk to me about his story. She didn't say anything. She just took his hand when I released him and walked away. I don't know what was happening on the inside of that. I didn't need to. What I needed was what I already had, a room full of children who were reading and writing and building parking structures for emergency vehicles and learning how to be in a community together. 32 of them, including one boy with wide brown eyes who had arrived in September a little watchful, a little unsure, and was leaving for winter break in December, able to write a full paragraph about helicopters. Mira Anand sent me a card at the end of the year. She thanked me for responding the way I had. She said Priya had asked to be in my class again the following year, which wasn't how it worked. Second grade was a different hallway, but she said it in the way parents do when they mean something larger. I kept the card in my desk drawer next to the tissue box. I still log every significant interaction. Not because I expect the next Diane Holloway tomorrow, but because the log is part of what protects the children in my room, and protecting the children in my room is the only thing that has ever really mattered to me. 11 years of first grade had taught me that the most powerful thing a teacher could do had nothing to do with curriculum maps or benchmark scores. It was simply this: show up, pay attention, write it down, and do not let anyone, not entitled parents, not carpool line gossips, not people who walk in carrying documents they plan to set on a principal's desk, make you forget whose classroom it actually is. It's the children's classroom. It always has been. And no one was going to take that from me.